I want to pull up this story from the Post Millennial. 60% of abortion clinics shut down in red states with pro-life laws after Roe was overturned. So for those that are just tuning in, we've been talking a bit about the Convention of States. A couple things that I think are interesting here is, for one, I definitely want to get into your guys' thoughts on abortion. But I was thinking about this. For one, this story actually was a meme. It was a meme because people were saying, if Planned Parenthood claims that most of the services they provide are unrelated to abortion, why would they shut down when Roe v. Wade was overturned? And maybe there's some like political point they make. But the mainstream press came out and said, the corporate press, I shouldn't call them mainstream, said that it's actually not true. They're not shutting down. It was just Planned Parenthood was like moving funds around. Well, now we see that a large portion actually did shut down when abortions became illegal. So I'm curious in this regard. One, obviously, we'll have I want to discuss your thoughts on this stuff. But I was also thinking in terms of Convention of States, is it considered limiting of the federal government to codify a restriction on abortion, or the inverse? To codify the restriction on banning abortions, right? Because that's what the left has been arguing for. I suppose the argument from the left is the government was restricting its ability to ban this. The argument from the right is the government was giving itself the authority over it. You see how there's kind of like both sides are arguing it's an overreach. Both sides would be arguing that their move is a limitation. I'm curious of your thoughts on that, or let's just say it's a hard segue into the abortion topic, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, I would say generally speaking, if you were to give the federal government the power to regulate or allow abortion, I mean, that's essentially what Dobbs said. It's like, this is not the federal government's business. This is a true federalist decision. It said the Constitution doesn't say anything about this. It belongs to the states. So I think that is the correct constitutional position. And I think anytime, if under our convention you said we're going to give the federal government more power to ban abortions, I think you're now expanding federal power.
Yeah, I think either way
right.
It goes, whether it's pro-life or pro-choice, it would not be eligible under our rubric.
And to be clear, like I want to give my personal bias. I'm completely anti-abortion.
Me too.
So here I am, a guy from the right, anti-abortion, and I just don't think that that's in the Constitution for the federal government to deal with.
And you know what? I agree. You know, I like the idea. The problem is, I should say the challenge is that you've got a side that's willing to have the Constitution be amended to enforce their ideology.
Absolutely.
Whereas you are willing to compromise and say, we don't like abortion, but let the states decide. I've mentioned this quite a bit. This is conservatives compromising on the issue of pro-life versus pro-choice, whereas the left is arguing every state should have to allow it. The right saying let some decide. Let's say decide for themselves. So it's split.
This is a real example of why a convention of the states, having the discussion of convention of the states is important to America, because I think as what I'm seeing polls go on and people realize that the Supreme Court decision in Dobbs didn't ban abortion as the left said it did, and that this is a decision that the people at the local level and state level can make. More and more people, even folks who are for abortion being legal, are saying, well, okay, I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with me having a say in what these decisions are. And that's really the argument we're making with Convention of the States is, look, let's not just abortion, but a whole host of other issues that are really local issues. Education is a good example. Really, do we need the federal government telling us how parents should educate and local schools should? No, let the community be able to make these decisions themselves.
So we can get an amendment that says no more Department of Education.
Yeah, we could.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's at the very top of my list. And
mine too.
The majority of the American public agrees with that. Not just on the right. There's plenty of people on the left that are like, hey, we want to educate our own kids our own way. If you live in Texas, which is where I'm from, right, and people think of it as a red state, well, I live just outside of Austin. That's about as blue as it gets. People in Austin want to decide how to educate their own kids. They don't want the federal government telling them how to do that.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think, to keep in line with this, one of the things we talk about every so often is that, to put it rather, I guess, crudely, the left is removing themselves from the future of America through the sterilization of their children, through abortion. And so when you look at education, it's the one venue they have.
Absolutely.
I say this all the time, that the left, I wrote a book 15 years ago now called It Takes a Family. It was in response to Hillary Clinton's book, It Takes a Village. And one of the things I realized was everyone said, oh, it takes a village. It's an African proverb. And I said, no, it's a Marxist plan, because the left, through their sterilization, abortion, they're not having children. People on the left are not having kids. So if they're going to win elections in the future, they have to corrupt your kids.
Yep.
And the way they do that is the village. And the village being, why do you think they want to expand daycare? Why do you think they want to expand preschool and kindergarten and send everybody to government schools for all these things?
They want to separate you from your kids.
Because they want to separate you from your kids. Exactly. They want to indoctrinate them into their point of view. And they are, and that's why do you think the teachers unions, the Roosevelt, when the issue came up about unions for federal workers, was 100% against it. And in fact, ultimately, and still the case today, federal unions cannot negotiate wages and benefits. Why? Because they knew that if you give the rights of workers in a government organization the right to organize, and you gave the power to the governor, the people in the government to reap benefits on them, then the teachers are going to, or the federal employees are going to shower money on these folks who make their decision, and you're going to have corruption, and you're going to have control by the union of the government. Exactly what's happened in the schools, exactly where we are, and so it is absolutely essential for us to to fight this battle.
There was an Education Weekly poll that came out just after the 2016 election that found that half of teachers had voted for Hillary Clinton, but something like 29-30% had voted for Donald Trump. I mean, the occupation is completely partisan. You aren't sending the same people. And in part, I would argue that the homeschool movement has such legs, especially after the COVID pandemic. You know, if you're interested in education, especially in your own children's education, in your conservative, you're probably willing to try homeschooling, whereas that's not true for especially women who have been told your career is everything. If you have a kid, you've got to get back to work as soon as possible. Otherwise, you will lose your identity. I mean, the system is biased towards the flexible parents who are willing to stay involved in their kids' lives.
Yeah, we have 7 children. We homeschooled all of our kids through grade school. It was the best thing. My wife is a neonatal intensive care nurse. She's a lawyer. And once we started having children, she phased out of that work, and she will tell you that it was the best investment she's ever made. We have amazing kids. We feel very, very blessed, and I would just challenge anybody who decided not to do that and went to the workplace. Show me your portfolio of what you accomplished in the last 30 years versus what my wife accomplished in the last 30 years, and you'd be hard pressed to outdo what she did.
This is the craziest thing, is that particularly on the left, they don't understand the value of an investment in creating a human life, and it's a really sad prospect of what their lives are going to be like when they're 70 or 80 years old.
I gave a speech in Hungary at CPAC Hungary a few weeks ago. My first thing I said was, can any of you tell me the name of your great-great-grandparents? Can you tell me the name of your great-great-grandparents? Great-great-grandparents.
Oh.
The point was, in a very short period of time, you're going to be lost. Your name.
My great-grandfather. I know.
I'm talking great-great.
Yeah,
okay, so the reality is, in 100 years or less, no one's going to know your name. You will be gone, and the only thing you will create in your life that lasts forever and goes on is creating a human soul. I think, and those children then creating other human souls. That's your legacy, and so many people just have very misplaced priorities.
There's this photo I saw. I can't remember exactly how they did it, but it was like a single grandmother, and then her kids, her grandkids, and her great-grandkids, and she had like 5 kids, who each had like 5 kids, who each had like 5 kids, and it's just insane. Yeah. How many people. The impact. Yeah. Remember, you're having these children, and you're raising them and nurturing them, and you're preparing them to do the same to the next generation. I mean, you put yourself into your children, and they can then take what you've given them and pour that into their children and their children. I mean, you got to keep them out of those schools. Yeah, the key and the point is, the left doesn't want you to do that. They want to convince men and women not to educate their children, not to fight for the souls of their children, to give them to them. And they
Well, they will rightly educate your children.
What you got to say to them is say, if you have a kid, they could become a child star, and then you're rich.
Yeah. Or they can have a lot of followers on Instagram, and that will make you feel immortal forever. Because, as you know, when you retire and you need assistance, your Instagram followers will come take care of you. That's what they're known for.
Check it out. There is going to be some influencer today. They're going to be childless. They're going to be 80. And they're going to be on Instagram, which no one uses anymore. It's going to be like only old people use. Everyone's on Instatalker or something like that. And then
on WeChat.
Yeah, on WeChat. And they're going to be like, I use Musiplex prunes. You should get yours today. And then the several they'll probably get $50,000 per read because of inflation, of course. And then they'll use that to
that'll buy them Mucilex.
I would just say take a step back and recognize that this generation, last few generations who've been sold this bill of goods are the most unhappy, depressed generation, most medicated generation in the history of the country. And there is a reason for that, because what you have been sold is a lie.
Yeah.
And you just need to get back to the truth and understand what really makes you happy.
I mean, I really do hold social media accountable for a lot of this. I think it gives you a false sense of community. It's not that it can't be a great tool, and it's not that it can't be very powerful, but you know, Robert Putnam, who wrote Bowling Alone, talks about this. It's just the complete degradation of community. If at the end of the day you don't know your neighbors, you are not going to be able to call your many, many Facebook followers to help you if you have a crisis with your kids in the middle of the night, or if you fall and you need help. You need to know the people that you live near. I mean, that's the only way to truly feel fulfilled in life.
It's a scary prospect of what the future is going to look like for a lot of people on the left, because they're going to vote for government to replace family. They've been doing that.
That is what they're doing. Yes.
But imagine what it's going to be like when these millennials are all older. They're going to be out in a massive voting block saying the government should provide for us a young person to change our diapers or something like that.
Well, I think they're already saying that. And you know, when I travel around the country and I talk to young people and they look at people our age, they're like, hey, thanks a lot for the debt. Or what did we get for this? And that's what we've done, is we've spent their future. It's pretty outrageous when you think about it. We self-justify that. I say we because of my age, but our generation, we're leaving this incredibly massive debt. It means their taxes are going to go up. Their standard of living is going to go down. And if you ask somebody, hey, are you willing to do that to their kids? You would say, well, of course I'm not. That's outrageous. It's immoral. But that's precisely what we've been doing. And that's precisely what Democrats are selling to us today.
Yeah, you know, I don't want to say that it's, you know, you mentioned your age. I'm assuming you guys are both boomers. Is that your boomers? Oh, the boomers.
Boomers and rhinos.
Yeah, we're bad people.
No, it's the corruption in government.
Yeah.
That it's like the boomer generation, for all this the flack they get from millennials for like gutting our future. It's like, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to fight back on that.
Well, the reason I was going to as well.
Oh, okay.
That's my point.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
My point was that you've got corrupt elites in government who are deficit spending and selling you a false, you know, bill of goods, and then to blame the regular working class American person is absurd. No, the problem is the elitism that has been selling us out. Before the boomers, there were other people in government. It wasn't the boomers who started the Federal Reserve.
Okay, I'm going to fight back on this, because those people get elected because they've convinced the American public that government can solve their problems, and they believe it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they're not doing it. These aren't people who came from outer space and are opposing this. These are people that you, listening to this, elected because they promised you something and you believed it. That's the problem. So I always say, you can point to Washington and say, oh, it's terrible, it's so divided. Well, now we're seeing, you know what? The country's pretty divided, and they're just a reflection of that. And the same thing with this deficit spending. They're a reflection of a country that wants material goods and services, and they don't want to pay for them. Yeah. How many things do you want? Oh, I don't want to pay that much, so let's just borrow the money. And that's what's going on. So you can blame Washington, and I do, but that's why a grassroots movement like this that awakens America and has a discussion about what the consequences of what we're doing is such an important thing at this time.
I wonder if it's just a natural ebb and flow, right? You know, strong men make good times make weak men. You familiar?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And maybe there's no real it's just something that occurs. When things get good, you don't have enough people who are calloused and hardened to what's going on. You're trying to wake up a ton of people to say support a convention of states. There's a good argument about it, but let the argument happen, I suppose.
Why is the greatest generation the greatest generation?
World War II?
Yeah.
It was hard.
Because it was hard.
Yeah.
I mean, people are made. I mean, everybody wants to avoid suffering. But suffering is part of life. It's whether you want to suffer for something that's great and worthy and last, or something that makes you feel good for the short period of time.
I was saying this earlier today that, people often say, like, maybe we're in hell. You've heard that, I imagine, from some people, like, maybe we're actually in hell. Look how awful things are. And I was like, maybe we're actually in heaven. Because, this world suits us so well. It could just be that we've developed for the world around us, or that we were made for the world. But the way I see it is, suffering, there is no happiness without sadness. There is no light without dark.
No.
The universe is rather perfect in that. It's a great experience, and it's just about how you choose to see it. I've gone through some really dark days, but I've always just chosen to be like, this is something that I'll remember, and I can always say I've experienced
and learn from.
I've had some really bad moments, like standing out in a thunderstorm, shoes getting soaking wet, car broke down, and I'm laughing like. Heck of a story, man.
Yeah.
It's something in life you get to say you've done, I suppose. And you rack all these things up, and it just feels, whenever I would find myself in these really crazy moments, obviously not having my life threatened. Like, those obviously are truly horrifying. But I'm saying in, like, all the frustrations of a car dying in the middle of the road, having to get out in the rain. I'm like, those are things that are supposed to be bad. I actually think that's the spice of life, Like, you put habanero peppers in your food, it burns, but you like doing it. You know what I mean?